if you just think about all of the interactions you have in your life, whatever vendors or, somebody dealing with something at your house or a delivery or, I mean, just anything, any company or organization you deal with, and just the ability to execute and follow through and do exactly what you said you were going to do when you said you were going to do it, or better yet, exceed what expectation you set. I mean, I don't know, but it feels like if you could just nail that one, you're probably ahead of like 98% of the people out there. It is tremendous.
Welcome to Grow Think Tank. This is the one and only place where you will get insight from the founders and the CEOs of the fastest growing privately held companies. I am the host. My name is Gene Hammett. I help leaders and their teams navigate the defining moments of their growth. Are you ready to grow?
Today, we're going to talk about values-driven leadership. Values are the company values that really do make you successful, create the kind of culture you want. And it is really an important piece of an overall performance of a company. You may not realize this because they're underlying aspects of who we are, how we connect with each other, how work gets done, how we solve problems, how we decide things. Values are a leverage point inside of how decision-making goes when you're not in the room. Today, we'll unpack a little bit more of that. Our special guest today is Jeff Socha with Socha Capital. They've made the Inc. list. What's really special about this company is that the leader, Jeff, that going into this interview today, he's been on the Inc. list 3 times, or other fast growth companies with 3 different companies, not 3 times with one company. I'm sure he's made multiple years, but just pointing out the fact that he's got some wisdom around this and repeatability with this. So I would lean into what he's talking about this. When you think about the values, yes, you should know what your company values are. If you don't, that's a signal that you're not living by the values. And I say that with love and a little bit of a challenge here. Like, this is something you definitely want to pay attention to. If you are using your values, but you're wondering, how could we be more tuned in? How do we have values-driven leadership, which is what we're talking about. Today, we're going to give you a little bit more about the practical and actionable side to values and how you live them. And if you are really interested in going further, I've got a list of other things I've done. I've got a book that I'm sort of halfway written around values. I'll share it with you. If you don't have your values, I'll share with you exactly how we suggest companies come up with their values. If you need to go, how do we operationalize them in our business? I'll share that guide with you. So they're 2 different things. And all you have to do is ask, send me an email, gene@genehammett.com. Let me introduce myself. I am Gene Hammett, the CEO coach, and we do leadership development mostly for fast growth companies that are in a bit of chaos, driving forward hard. And we help them create the kind of leadership that's a stronger foundation as they continue to scale. The leadership model that got you to where you are likely has to change and shift in order for you to continue that level of growth. Otherwise, you'll be met with too much chaos and too much frustration, and it'll really feel heavy to you. And so that being said, if you're curious about the work we do, it's absolutely free for you to join us for our next live workshop. Go to training.corelevation.com, where you can find out more about how we serve and how we create companies that have that new leadership model that allows for scalable growth that is resilient. And so just go to training.corelevation.com. Now, here is our conversation with Jeff, and where we talk about values-driven leadership. Jeff, how are you?
Hey, Gene, thanks for having me on today.
I'm excited to have a conversation. We're going to talk about values-driven leadership. Before we dive into that, tell us about your company, Soha Capital.
Yeah, Soha Capital was formed a few years ago, and it serves entrepreneurs who are really successful entrepreneurs who need services that you might consider family office services in the area of, income tax reduction and legal planning, investment management, cash flow planning, and risk management. And so we essentially set up and manage these micro family offices for people.
Fantastic. I'm kind of curious, when you got into this field, how is AI impacting the way you serve, or is it?
I think it's augmenting us a little bit in the sense that software has enabled our work for a long time. And so AI as it gets embedded in the software helps speed up the work. And in a lot of sense, it helps us with our research around, when most of our work is you bring us problems in your life that you want solved, and we need to engineer solutions to those. And so, as we're trying to engineer those solutions, there's an element of homework and research that is accelerated through the use of AI tools for sure.
Well, I am excited to talk to you today about values-driven leadership, but there's a little bit of a special fact here. It's rare that people make the list once. It's very rare that they
Yeah.
make it twice. But you've had three companies make the Inc. list. Did I
Yeah.
hear that right?
Yeah, I've had three different companies that have all made, fastest growing company lists, from whether it's Austin Business Journal, the top 50 fastest growing companies out of Austin. I went to Texas A&M. So a lot of these colleges now have, like, A&M has the Aggie 100, which is the top 100 fastest growing companies anywhere in the world from owned by an alumni. Of course, you have Inc. 5000. You've got a lot of different lists like that. And I've had three different companies make those lists. Yeah.
Well, that's impressive. It probably says a lot about your leadership. And I'm kind of curious. We're going to dive in today about Soha, but values-driven leadership, was that a part of your other two ventures?
Yes. And I mean, in a way, I think for me, the values have evolved over time, but the values that we have here at Soha Capital are not just a plaque on the wall or something that was created in a conference or a workshop. They're something that we literally make decisions by. It's the number one reason that somebody's going to get hired or fired. It's the reason that we're successful. I think that the values that we live by, and I'm happy to get into them, are values that sort of manifested over the last couple decades of my career, and really having some awareness and reflection around what is it that I think are the key ingredients of success.
I love the conversation on values. And anyone listening in here that's probably heard, more than two episodes has probably heard that word come up quite a lot. And so I wanted to kind of like frame this in for everyone. Like it is not just enough to have values. You've got to live by them. You've got to operationalize them inside of our processes, like you just mentioned, hiring and firing, but also development, also decision making, all the things that you just said, I will compliment with you. And I can back it up with hundreds and hundreds of interviews with other founders like yourself. So, Jeff, you're not alone in this whole values and the importance of values, but the way you express them, I'm sure you do some unique things. I'm hoping we can discuss some of that today. I'm kind of curious about how you come up with your values. I don't think there's many different ways to do it, but what is the best way over the last three companies that you find in defining your values?
I don't have an easy answer for that one, Gene. I think that in the past, I'll admit, I've done the workshop core values. I've done the get fired up at an event core values. I've done the we need to write something down core values. I've probably done it every way out there of creating them. And it always bothered me that the values were just sort of something that I made up one day and just kind of wrote down one day, filled out a form one day, and there was no meaning behind them. And I think because there was no meaning from the origination. And after reflecting and just constantly thinking about how do I become better as a leader, and recognizing first, I think this is a key realization, is that I understand that everything will grow at the rate that I do. I think that's not just for me. I think that's for each of my people. I think that's probably a universal truth, is that everything will grow at the rate you do. And so once I take that ownership into account, I have to think, how am I growing in the first place? Like, how did I get where I am? And the values that have helped me succeed probably need to be the values that are instilled. And through that reflection, through constant, just whether it's journaling or meditating or reflecting or just spending time, like I don't know if you've seen this, Gene. There was this TV show or movie that came out, Jonah Hill and his counselor, and they made this like documentary thing. I watched it. I thought, man, it's so powerful. So I need to get me a guy like that. So I meet with a guy every Friday. Of course, think about it as counseling or just a way to externally process your thoughts or whatever you want. there has to be effort put into that to really dig this stuff out of yourself. And the core values that we live by, and that they're not necessarily new. These have been around for a while. I've had these for some time now, are growth, reliability, communication, and respect. And I believe those four things, whether you work for me or not, whether you're in these companies or a different company or on your own career trajectory, I think it would be very difficult to find a person who's really good at those four things and really striving at those four things that is failing. I think that anybody that is doing a great job with those four things is going to succeed at anything they do in life.
Now, let me break in here for a second. Jeff said something really profound. Uh, Everything will grow at the rate you do. Here's what that means to me. If you are not growing, it will make everything harder. It will make all of the work that you're trying to do, all of the innovations and projects and strategic initiatives, all the KPIs that you've set harder, and it gets harder and harder as you grow. As you add people to this and you begin to work on yourself, you begin to work on your own limiting beliefs or your own traumas or your own perspectives, and you're willing to see new ways, that meaning you have a growth mindset and you're willing to see that and embrace it, you have a much better chance to create a kind of company that will grow beyond you. Because if you are the driving force in your company, you can only take it so far. As you add more people, the chaos will begin to compound. We've seen this over and over and over at scale. And so when you think about your ability to grow as a leader, how are you embracing your own growth, learning new skills? If you cannot write down in words how you've grown over the last 12 months, it's a problem. I say this from my heart, that when you want to grow, it's better to be intentional and say, I'm getting better at communication, or I'm getting better at listening. I'm getting better at reading body language. Be very specific. And you can work on that for 3 months. You could read a book about it. You could talk to friends about it. You could hire a coach. I'm not even saying hire me, but if you're not willing to grow, it will make everything that you do that much harder. But when you are growing, it makes it easier for your company to grow around you and to grow beyond you. That being said, let's go back to Jeff for a little bit more values-driven leadership conversation. Well, that sets us up for, what are your 4 core values?
Well, I shared them there, and in no particular order. I think one of the things I want to do, Gene, is get some branding around, like, how do I hold these four things sort of almost in equal weighting? But reliability, communication, growth, respect, those four are very important. I can give you a very quick definition of them, but reliability, let's say, is do what you say you're going to do when you said you're going to do it. Communication, you can't leave any room for gaps for negativity. You can't leave any room for gaps for misunderstanding. You've got to have really clear, concise, responsive, over communicate. I think that probably in most of our lives, I think one of the biggest source of problems in our lives are people problems. And I think one of the core, most common fundamental reasons for people problems is a poor communication or miscommunication. They say the number one outcome of communication is misunderstanding. So we want to avoid that, right? So we've got reliability, communication, growth. I mean, are we better than we were yesterday? Are we better this week than last week? Or like, what are we doing today that's going to make us better than yesterday? What is our growth plan? Like, so we have to constantly be striving to be better every day. And then respect. I mean, you just have to have a common decency and respect in all of your dealings, in your work, and the opportunities we're given, the people we interact with, et cetera.
I see why you have the values, because if you're operating from all 4 of those, and reliability, communication, growth, and respect, you're getting the work done. You can't. There's no room for error in those 4. I have problems with people that make them too aspirational.
Yeah.
These are something that it's probably, if you were putting together a math formula of your company's success, these would be the 4 values that would probably show up in that math.
Well, these are 4 that are really core. They're really fundamental, but they're not necessarily table stakes. Because I'm not going to have a core value of something like honesty. If you lie to me, you just get fired. You don't work here. Like, we're just like, that's just a table stakes. So I don't have core values that are table stakes because that's like there's just a core value is something that um, we can tolerate you not being perfect at. There's room for growth. There's room for improvement. There's room to strive and be better. But there's some things that are just you're not going to tolerate, and those are the table stakes. So we're not going to have something like integrity or honesty as a core value because there's no room in those.
I agree with you. I want to go a little bit deeper with this. Values driven leadership. Is that a phrase that you have adopted? Did you read it somewhere? Where'd you get it from?
Again, I think it's something that has come to life through my entrepreneurial journey, through building companies and understanding more so than ever that these values, when we make decisions according to these values, this is going to lead to success. I'm never going to have a hard time. Like people on our team will have errors and they will have mistakes and they will have failures. But if somebody can come and defend a failure, defend the decision that led to failure, in context of these core values and say, I made the decision and this is how it ties in with our core values. Even if it's a terrible outcome, that's a decision you can support, right? Um, Now, if you have failures and things that are results of decisions outside of these core values, that's where you have a problem, right? And so I think understanding what has allowed me to be successful individually and then trying to teach, train, instill, but also hire and fire around those is has led to having successful companies. And these are values that I would imagine if you called anyone that works for me right now, they would be able to recite those right off the bat. It's not, we actually don't have them on any sort of plaque or any sort of advertisement or post or like, because we don't have to, right? They're lived and they're talked about in such a frequent setting that they're a part of who we are as an organization.
Well, Jeff, one of my values is to go deeper. So I'm going to ask you if we were looking at your company day to day, week to week, month to month, what are the practices as it relates to values that we would see that are making the most impact to your company?
You know, it's hard to pick one thing that I think maybe stands out. But if I were going to pick a standout thing, I think it's the commitment to reliability. And I think these days, I don't know what it is in our society, Gene, but if I had a young person coming to me and wanting to get advice from me, how do I succeed in life? And they're graduating high school or college or they're in their 20s or something, I would tell them if you can be reliable, you will probably surpass 90 something percent of your competition.
Yeah.
I think back in the day, maybe I don't know, maybe in my grandparents' time frame or something, I feel like somewhere in the past there was a time when work ethic was table stakes, when reliability was table stakes. And it's just not that way these days.
Yeah.
And it's so difficult if you just think about all of the interactions you have in your life, whatever vendors or somebody dealing with something at your house or a delivery or I mean just anything, any company or organization you deal with. And just the ability to execute and follow through and do exactly what you said you were going to do when you said you were going to do it, or better yet, exceed what expectation you set. I mean, I don't know, but it feels like if you could just nail that one, you're probably ahead of like 98% of the people out there. It is tremendous. And so what do we do inside of our company? We intentionally, there's a book that I liked called Getting Things Done. Every person that works here reads that book and they submit chapter by chapter book reports on that book. And it's sort of just a systematic book about project management. And we carve out on Friday afternoons a weekly review time, and that's to make sure there's no open loops, there's no loose ends from your week. Tie everything out. Make sure you've gone through. Did you get out? Did you get all your commitments done? Did you follow through on everything? And plan your next week. And then we have a reporting internally. So everyone reports to their manager by 1 o'clock on Friday afternoons with that weekly review and their plan for the next week. That allows for some back and forth through our internal communication. And then on Monday morning, again, we're going to sync up on that and have a discussion about anything that seems out of line Are you set up for success this week? And so, I mean, there's probably a good shoot. I mean, 20% of our work week that is dedicated to closing out the week strong, having a strong weekly review process, but also ensuring at the beginning of the week that we're set up for success. And I think there's a lot of effort put into that reliability and a culture of accountability around it that that is what it takes to deliver like that.
Jeff had just said something that's really kind of cute around this. The number one commitment is to reliability. And a lot of people don't have the work ethic they used to. And I agree with that. We did not have some of the same things that float around today in my early years of corporate America. Now, I will tell you this. I wrote a book called How to Have Tough Conversations. Now, our working title around this was Tough Conversations. And as we were exploring different names for the book and Tough Conversations, the concept came up as, why won't you just do your job? And sometimes we said, why won't you just do your damn job? And we played around that with that as the title, mainly for fun. But CEOs really light up when I tell them that. It's like, yeah, why don't people just do their job? So I'm sitting here reminding you that reliability is something not to blame others for not having, but you have to look at yourself and how are you contributing to the lack of reliability inside your organization? It's probably something that you're not doing or that's getting in the way of you holding people reliable, accountable, empowering them, whatever it may be. Back to Jeff. I love the detail of that on Friday. And that's really what I was asking for is the principles that you have put in place or the practices that reflect being reliable. Like you create space for that. You create a way to do it.
Well, if you want more, I'll give you one
Yeah, give me
thing
one
that
more.
has sort of manifested over 20 years that we have this thing that is in all of our, if you were to look at any of our internal reporting around whatever projects or things you're working on, is we have what we call last action and next action. Okay. And this was developed, I mean, over many years and refined and refined and refined and refined and refined. And the last action, you have to tell us a date and what happened last, who did what, like where are we now, right? That's the last action. And it has to have a date. And then you have to give the next action. And the next action must also have a date. And what is the next action you are taking to advance that project or initiative? I am sending this in on Tuesday, the 18th or whatever. Or I'm meeting with this person on Wednesday or whatever, right? And that last action, next action reporting um, is feel free anybody listening to steal that and implement it right away. It has a tremendous impact on our reliability.
I want to, ask you, how is that stored? Is it a spreadsheet or is there technology behind this?
Yeah, so we track it all in the CRM, and
Okay.
then so we have, in an advisory business, you have a lot of clients, and so we have that for every project for every client. And then what we do, and there's a lot of intentionality in this, and the people that do it feel like it's a little cumbersome. They don't enjoy it, but it leads to the outcomes that we need. We make them go and extract everything out of the CRM and put it into an executive summary to make it easier for their manager to read. We accomplish a couple things by that. One, it forces them to look at that data and sort it and filter it and organize it and like forces this like eye brain engagement with the content so that they have a higher quality in the data. It also makes it more efficient for their manager to review, um, but it lives in the CRM. Yeah.
I got a couple more questions on the practicality of a values-driven leadership. And
Sure.
one of them goes back to decision making. I know your four values, you've shared them with us already. How are you using that from a decision making standpoint? Because my perspective is the values have a leverage when you're not in the room because you can't always be in the room.
Right, exactly. And so, when I travel or I'm going to be away or I'm going to be, kind of my response time is going to be slow, my reception is going to be poor, whatever, and I'm unavailable, I tell people just make the best decisions you can and trust yourself. And they know that those decisions, those values are a filter for that decision. And if they think, hey, this is the most respectful thing for the client, or this is the decision I made, that needed for us to follow through or do what we said we were going to do or whatever it is. I think if you don't have anybody to consult with and you need to make a decision in a vacuum, let those core values guide you, and we're going to support the decision regardless of whether or not it's the one I would have made or your manager would have made.
I would imagine it goes about what you said earlier. If you're not in the room, they have to make the decision to vacuum. You're on a plane and clients upset about something. You could take those four values and turn them into a question or whatever it is. And if you're following that process, you're probably going to make the right decision. But if you do happen to make one that doesn't quite align or get the results, it's okay, right? You learn from that, and you're able to, but you're intentional about using those values for the decision at hand. Is that
One
fair?
thing that I think I have to be intentional about as a leader is when I am available, not making the decision. And so when I am in the right headspace, mindset, and when I have the right discipline, and somebody brings me a question, hey, what do you think we should do? My natural reaction is just to be like, "Oh, I think you should do this, right?" And so when I have the discipline to pause and say that I think the best thing to do when anybody asks me what should we do is for me to not answer and to reflect back to them and say, what do you think we should do? And then I think this is really key to developing people underneath me is not agree if they give the answer I would have given, but instead agree if I can tolerate that answer at any level.
Mhm.
So even if that answer is different than what I would have given, if I can tolerate it within the boundaries of those values, let's try it. Because they need to feel the weight of those decisions, and I need to teach them to make decisions of consequence. And I would much rather them do that when I'm around than when I'm not around. So I think it's really important. It's probably more important to not make decisions when I am around.
I agree with you. I think a lot of founders have gotten to where they are through, I'll say this in air quotes, control. It has worked, it's fast, but it may not work at scale. You've got 30 employees. As you climb up to 50 and 100, you have to change that dynamic, and literally you want them to have the confidence to make these decisions. And the only way they get there is by doing it over time, and you knowing that they're, whatever it is, they learn from it, they pick up the mistakes. So we see this quite often with organizations we work with from the coaching standpoint. And so you're spot on with this, Jeff, and I just really appreciate you pointing that out. Well, that's our time today here. We've been talking about values-driven leadership. I appreciate your wisdom with this, Jeff, and thanks for being here.
Thanks, Gene. I appreciate having me on.
Another fantastic episode for you here. Values are not fluffy. They are actually practical tools that allow you to create the kind of company that you want. It allows you to see when people are in alignment or out of alignment. It allows you to see where people are, a fit for the culture or not. And there's many different ways that values show up inside of our organizations that you could use them as leverage for growth. Now, if you're curious about any of those things, just send me an email. I'll share with you all of our tools. We give away so much for free because we know the value of this, and we want to make a difference in the way you run your companies and the way you lead. So when you think of leadership and you think of growth think Think Tank.